Chapter 1. A Mystery on Makamte.
Mander Zuma pursed his lips as he moved through the back alleys of Makamte. He was far from the tract, far from the necropolis that dominated this world, far from the site of Toro Irana's death, and far from satisfied with what he had discovered so far about the death of his former apprentice. Word had reached Yavin 4 and the new Jedi Order in the form of a complaint from the Congress of Caliphs that ruled Makamte of a blue-skinned Jedi who had killed a Caliph's nephew. Apologies were made through the New Republic's diplomatic channels, but Mander was pulled from his regular duties in the archives and dispatched to find out what had really happened. His assignment made perfect sense to Mander. He had taught Toro in the ways of the Force, and had monitored the young Jedi's own reports back to the Order. His own skill set dovetailed nicely with Toro's assigned mission, yet the older Jedi was still reluctant to leave behind the archives, to leave Yavin 4 after years of diligent and productive research. What Mander found on this planet surprised him. Not that Toro had gotten into a fight. The young man had been headstrong and easily riled even when he had been his apprentice, and the Swokes were by all reports a prickly species to deal with. But the idea that Toro had gotten into an argument so easily, or that he had made such a fatal mistake in combat, troubled Mander deeply as he made the long trip from Yavin to Makamte. As he stepped off the shuttle and breathed the dusty air of this world, the questions swirled within him. What had gone wrong? Had it been his training that had been at fault? Had Mander prepared him insufficiently? Or were there other factors at work? As a student, Toro had been a superb warrior, limber and smooth, a blue-fleshed blur in combat. More important, he bonded with his lightsaber, treating the blade as an extension of his self. Even in training, Mander was impressed with the young Pantoran's skill and confidence. Mander himself had none of that easiness in combat. The Force was strong in the older Jedi, but it was directed elsewhere. He could feel the energy moving through him, but his own lightsaber often felt like an alien thing, a lump in his hand. He had come to the Force late in life, as did many in the later years of the Empire, and it showed. Toro was better with a lightsaber, and Mander was sure that he would have become a fine Jedi Knight. A better Jedi Knight than he. But now, Toro was dead, and Mander was not sure why. Mander's first stop was to claim the body and examine it, a rented medical droid at his side, burbling commentary. The dried flecks of blood on his apprentice's lips and the broken bones along one side of his body spoke of a sudden, violent end. But there was also a darkening of the young man's veins and arteries, violet against the sea blue of his flesh, that had not been present in life, and pointed to an external agent at work. Further, purple crystals budded at the corners of Toro's eyes. Mander was not sure if this was natural to the Pantorans in death, but he assumed it was not, and took a sample of the material. It had a pungent aroma, more cloying than the acrid dust of Makamte's air. There were similar crystals in the dead Jedi's darkened veins, now stilled of pulsing life. Something had been injected or ingested, he decided. Toro was under the influence of something else before the fight, Mander thought. And possibly the two events were tied. The older Jedi double-checked his evaluation before consigning Toro's body to the funeral pyre. The Swokes, regardless of their official indignation, were extremely helpful with funeral arrangements. It was a point of pride for them. Mander Zuma visited the scene of Toro's death, the restaurant. It had been closed for a period of mourning for the Caliph's nephew, but already the smashed furniture had been stacked to one side for recycling, and a new sheet of plate glass installed, replacing the one shattered by Toro's exit. The waitstaff was initially unhelpful, but Mander's modest knowledge of Swoken, the native language, combined with a bit of the force in the voice, helped smooth out the questions. By the end of the interview, the staff was positively chatty about the incident. Yes, the blue-skinned Jedi had been there. He was waiting for someone, he had said. He had been drinking. A lot. Local stuff, but a Rodian came in with another bottle, a gift. The Jedi had insulted the staff, insulted the other diners. He had gotten into an argument with Chokachok, the Caliph's nephew. The Jedi pulled his lightsaber and killed Chokachok, killed 5 more regulars as well, and had left a dozen regenerating, screaming in that weird liquid-sounding off-worlder basic. Not a proper language at all. Foaming at the mouth. Then he had smashed his way through the window. The wait staff thought he was trying to escape, but had forgotten he was 40 floors up. The joke was on him. No one had found the Jedi's energy blade, or at least reported that they had found it. Yes, they had the bottle the Rodian brought somewhere around. They were still cleaning up the mess. The Swokes provided the bottle, and Mander calibrated his medical data pad. A few simple tests on the dregs in the bottle confirmed his hunch. There was something unusual in the scent wine. Potent, unknown, and similar in composition to the crystalline tears at the corners of the corpse's eyes. Distilled out, it had the same cloying smell. The wine's bouquet covered the smell. Poison, then. The Rodian brought the wine. Was the poison what clouded his judgment at the end? The possibility left Mander concerned. Why was Toro unwary enough to drink the wine in the first place? A Jedi in the field had to be aware of his surroundings and potential attacks. Had he trusted the Rodian, or whoever the Rodian represented? And what, if anything, did this have to do with his assigned task to acquire the navigation coordinates for the Indrexu spiral? Was someone trying to stop the New Republic from gaining those codes? Or had Toro stumbled onto something else? Indeed, scanning the last communications from Toro to the new Jedi Order had been troubling as well. They had been brief, even terse. He had made initial contacts. He had begun negotiations. He was pleased with the progress, nothing to indicate that there was a problem. Even so, there was a brusqueness in his communiques that now gave Mander pause. Details were missing. Now the trail led to this warehouse, made of ancient wood, reinforced with the cold iron that was so much a part of Swoke's architecture. There were few Rodians on Makum Te, and it was relatively easy to track Toro's deadly wine steward back here. A Rodian family cartel ran a small trade out of these warehouses, trafficking in ornate funeral plaques and reliquaries and other off-world items. The darkness of the alley cloaked him more effectively than any mind trick, but the lock was old and stubborn, and at last Mander used the Force to snap the hasp. So much for getting in and getting out without leaving any trace, he thought. Carefully, he slid the door open, but was met only with a hollow echo of the sliding metal. he slipped inside, leaving enough of a gap that he could leave quickly if things went bad. Mander moved quietly at first, but it was quickly clear that no one seemed to be present. Moonlight from the frosted skylights overhead shone on a bare floor. Mander reached into a vest pocket and pulled out a set of Magna specs, 2 pinkish lenses set in hexagonal frames. He unfolded the lenses and placed them on the bridge of his nose. Magnets in the frame held them there, pinching his flesh slightly. When he tapped the side of the lenses, they issued a soft, pale red glow, heightening the available light in the dim warehouse. Large wooden racks stood in neat, ordered rows from floor to ceiling along the length of the structure. Empty cargo containers were lined along one wall, and a trio of manual load lifters, great Walker engines with huge spatulate hands, along the other. These Rhodians were too poor or too cheap for droid-operated versions. The shelves were heavily laden with blank epitaph plates and bolts of funeral shrouds, all covered in a thin coating of dust. Scraps and more dust were heaped in the corners as well. Whatever business was being done out of this warehouse had precious little to do with mortuary arrangements. In the center of the room was a pile of broken crates, damaged and abandoned in a rush to clear out. Clear spots showed where other crates once stood, and the dust was disturbed by the broad feet of the load lifters. Somewhere far off, in some connecting warehouse, there was a soft thunder of people moving crates, but this place was devoid of workers. Mander frowned. Whoever poisoned Toro expected someone to come after them, and had probably decided to put a few planets between them and their pursuers. No doubt, the warehouse was under an assumed name and behind 3 shell companies. Tracking them down would not be easy. Mander poked through the trash with his toe. Funeral robes and tapestries, metal plates with Swokes memorials, about 3 or 4 containers worth that had been breached and abandoned. And there, glittering in the moonlight, something dark and crystalline. The Jedi knelt down next to the pile and examined the crystals. They were purplish, dark almost to the point of being black. He sniffed it, and it gave off a rich, pungent aroma. Spice, but unlike any he had seen before. He pulled out a plastic clear envelope and scooped a handful of crystals into it. That was when he knew he was not alone. It could have been a shadow against the moonlight or a footstep landing too heavily, but at once he knew that someone else was in the warehouse with him. He rose slowly from his examination, trying to move naturally, his hand fumbling with the strap of the lightsaber. Still, he engaged it, and brought the ignited blade up, glowing green, before the first blaster bolt erupted. Mander parried the energy discharge, trying to send it back to his attacker, but succeeding only in deflecting it among the racks of epitaph markers. Inwardly, he cursed at his lack of skill. Another shot unleashed, again from near the warehouse's entrance, and again Mander turned the energy pulse aside, but only just, and it scorched the wall behind him. Mander reminded himself that he was in a wooden building containing flammable funeral shrouds. Too many such stray shots would be a bad thing.
I can do this all day.
He lied to the darkness.
Why don't you come out and we can talk?
There was a shadow against the doorway, and for a moment Mander was sure that his assailant would try to flee. Instead, a lone figure walked into a rectangular square of moonlight. Smoke swirled from the barrel of her DL-22 heavy blaster. She was almost Mander's height, and even in the pale radiance, Mander could see that her flesh was a rich blue, marked with yellow swirls on each cheek. Long hair, a deeper blue in shade, almost to the color of night, was worn short in the front, woven in a thick braid down the back. A Pantoran, then, like Toro. Her lips were a thin, grim line, and her eyes flashed with anger.
Why are you shooting at me?
Said Mander calmly, as if being shot at in a warehouse were a common occurrence for him.
I'm here for justice,
she said, and the barrel came up. Despite himself, Mander brought up his lightsaber in defense, but she did not fire.
Justice is good,
said Mander, trying to keep his voice casual.
I'm seeking justice as well. Perhaps you'd like to help me find some.
He paused and added,
You know, I once trained a Pantoran in the ways of the Force.
This time she did shoot, and Mander almost toppled back onto the pile of trash, bringing his blade up. Almost too late, and as it was, he deflected the bolt upward instead of back. There was the distant crash of a shattered skylight.
You're the one responsible for Toro's death, then,
said the Pantoran, her words as sharp as a vibroblade's edge.
Relative?
Asked Mander, willing himself to be ready for another shot. It did not come.
Sister.
Mander forced himself to relax, or at least give the impression of relaxing. He deactivated his lightsaber, even though he wasn't sure he could reignite it fast enough should she choose to fire.
You're Rian Irana, then,
he said.
Toro spoke to me of you.
The blaster jerked toward him for a moment, but the Pantoran did not fire. Mander added quickly,
I was not here when Toro died. I was back at the Academy on Yavin 4. I came here when we heard the news, to find out what happened, and to finish Toro's assignment.
The blaster wavered just a bit, but at last she pointed it away from the Jedi. Even in the moonlight, he could see a wetness glistening at the corner of her eyes.
It's your fault,
she managed at last, her voice throaty with grief. Mander waited, giving her time to gather her thoughts. When she spoke again, the iron had returned to her words.
Toro was a dreamer, and you took him to become a Jedi, and now he's dead. You are responsible.
Mander held his palms out and said simply,
Yes.
Rian was startled at the admission. She had apparently expected the Jedi to say many things, but not this. Mander looked hard at the young Pantoran. He could see the resemblance to Toro in her face. He continued,
Yes, I am responsible. Every man's journey is his own, but I did train your brother, and he was here on Makum Te on Jedi business. So, yes, I put him in harm's way, and I failed to prepare him for what he faced here. That is why I am here. I want to find out who poisoned your brother, to see justice brought against them.
For the first time, the Pantoran seemed confused.
Poison?
She managed.
I believe so,
said Mander.
I found something strange in his blood. And now there is this.
He held up the clear envelope with the crystals.
I found it here in the warehouse.
The Pantoran kept her blaster aimed at the Jedi, but reached out with the other hand. Mander held the envelope out to her and she took it, taking a few steps back immediately in case this was a trick. Reen stared at the purplish crystals, then shook her head. She holstered her blaster, and Mander returned his now inert lightsaber to his belt.
I think it is the poison that was used,
said Mander.
A Rodian administered it with some wine he brought to your brother in the restaurant. That was why Toro was unable to defend himself at his full abilities. Why he made such a mistake in combat and plunged out the window.
Another noise in the darkness around them. Mander's head came up. It was not from outside the warehouse this time. Inside. Someone familiar with the area who knew where to step.
"Hold on,"
he said.
"Others are here."
Reen began to say,
Don't worry. That's just...
but her words were cut off as Mander grabbed her and pulled her down. Blaster bolts erupted from 3 sides, firing into the pile of abandoned crates. Reen had her own blaster out in a flash, and for a wild moment, Mander was afraid she was going to use it on him. But instead, she returned fire against the assault, using the discarded shipping containers as cover. Mander rose to a crouch, his lightsaber ignited and at the ready. The shots were heavy, but not well placed, and he managed to bounce a few of them back. There was a shout of pain, and a string of curses in Swoken. Mander thought he must have gotten one of them.
I'd say a dozen.
Shouted Reen.
Some of them up on the racks. Swokes. Some Rhodians too.
"Must be the Rhodians that used the warehouse,"
responded Mander.
I know the clan.
Said Reen, bringing down a pair.
Bomu family. I recognize the facial tattoos. We're pinned down.
"Hang on,"
said Mander.
"I'm going to level the playing field."
Reen may have said something, but Mander didn't pay attention. Instead, he leapt forward, somersaulting toward one of the racks the Rhodians were using as a perch. Blaster bolts fell around him, but he didn't use his blade to block. Rather, he pulled it effortlessly through the rack's iron supports, slicing the metal easily. The entire set of racks shuddered, and then began to collapse in on itself. The shriek of the metal matched by the surprised shouts of the ambushers. Reen was at his side.
What did you do?
"I made a new pile of trash to hide behind,"
said Mander, as one of the surviving Swokes rose from the debris, a thick-barreled blaster in his hand. One swipe with the blade cut the weapon in two, and then the Swokes fell backward as Reen discharged a bolt squarely into the attacker's face. There was a short pause in the battle, and then the blaster fire started again, heavier than before. Looking back, Mander saw that their previous hiding place was on fire, and the flames were already spreading through the bolts of funeral cloth and to the room's supports. The Rhodians had climbed down to the ground, trying to surround the pair. They were now clear in the firelight.
"They're trying to burn us out. Can you make it to the door?"
asked Mander, but Reen just shook her head and brought down a Rhodian from across the room. Mander looked across the open floor between him and the entrance. Alone, on his best day, he might be able to make it. Carrying the Pantoran, he doubted he could get halfway before the crossfire caught him. He was about to chance it anyway when something extremely large shifted in the background. It was one of the manual load lifters, wading into a squad of Swokes. The huge flat feet smashed one, while the others broke and ran as it spun and slammed into another set of racks, toppling them against their neighbors in a chain of collapsing shelves. The Rhodians and Swokes started pulling back, firing behind them to deter pursuit. Perched in the control pit of the lifter, limbed by sparking control screens, was a Bothan, long-faced and furry. Reen put a hand on Mander's shoulder.
Don't worry. He's with me.
The Bothan was having trouble handling the load lifter, and as he tried to get the walker under control, it grazed one of the already burning roof supports. The support groaned menacingly, and parts of the roof and skylight started to cascade down around them.
About time you showed up.
Bellowed Reen at the pilot of the stumbling walker.
And now get us out of here before this place comes down around us.
The Bothan got the load lifter under something like control and brought one of the large pallet hands level to the floor. Reen grabbed on, and Mander, deactivating his lightsaber, leapt ahead of her and turned to help her up. Then the pair gripped the sides of the lifter as the Bothan maneuvered it towards the doors through a tunnel of the now flaming warehouse. The large door was still almost completely shut, but at the last moment, the Bothan spun the lifter around and slammed through it backward, smashing the door off its hinges. Then they were outside, tromping through the alleys. The load lifter got clear of the worst of the fire and set the pair down. The Bothan himself slid down from the side of the now smoking control pit. Whatever the Bothan had done to get it working had set its internal electronics on fire.
I thought you Jedi were never supposed to be surprised,
said Reen.
I was distracted,
said Mander, trying to keep the irritation within himself out of his voice. She was right. Despite her presence, he should have noticed their assailants creeping into their positions. In the distance, there were shouts and klaxons. The local authorities were responding to the fire, and the flames were clear along the roofline now.
We need to be elsewhere,
said Reen.
Pity we didn't get one of the Rhodians alive.
We found the poison that they used on your brother,
said Mander.
And we know that they're willing to kill to cover their tracks. For the moment, that's enough.
Dejaro of the Bomu clan made his way through the Swokes Bazaar, past the hucksters selling memorial mementos and purified ointments and funeral wreaths, past the stalls of seers and spiritualists who, for a small fee, would contact the spirits of the recently interred and, for a slightly larger fee, confirm that they were resting comfortably and satisfied with their funeral arrangements. Dejaro squeezed his way among the lumbering forms of the Makamte inhabitants, his own Rhodian frame unlikely to win any shoving match. He kept one hand inside his jacket, tightly gripping his heavy prize, fearful that something else would go wrong. The word had come down that afternoon. Coax, the one-eyed Clatuinian, had arrived on the planet, bearing with her both the goodwill of her master, the Spice Lord, and the Lordship's demands that the assigned task had been completed. Dejaro of the Bomu clan carried both good news and bad along with his package, and it was a good question which of the three was the heaviest weight. At the 4th Street, at the alchemical shop, he turned right and made for a singularly empty shop that displayed funeral wrappings, but had never seemed to succeed in selling any of them. The swokes behind the counter, scarred from many regenerations, just nodded to him as he passed through. Dejaro had been here before. The Rhodian climbed the iron spiral staircase to a windowless upper storage room. The room was lit by a single bulb, hanging from a noose-like cord. Coax was waiting for him, surrounded by racks of long-sleeved robes, used to dress the dead before interment or cremation. To Dejaro, it felt like they were surrounded by silent witnesses to hear his report. There was a low table between the two of them. The Clatuinian herself was lean and muscular, thinner than most of her species. She was dressed in dark red spacer's slacks and a vest, and kept a set of ceremonial throwing knives on her belt alongside her blaster. Dejaro knew the Clatuinians were mostly traditionalists, favoring the old weapons and ways. Coax apparently kept the affectations of the past alongside the more effective present. The Clatuinian's face was thin as well, but what took Dejaro aback was the crater where one eye had once been. Some would have worn a patch or had a plate bolted to their skull to hide the deformity, but Coax set a glowing red gem deep into her empty socket. The Rhodian wondered if the gem allowed the Spice Lord's agent to see into alien frequencies or tell if someone was lying. The idea chilled Dejaro to the bone.
Wajokosoro,
asked the Clatuinian in fluid Huttus.
have you brought it?
Dejaro nodded and pulled the prize from beneath his jacket. It was a thin cylinder fitted with a worn, comfortable grip along one side. It was heavier than Dejaro had thought it would be, particularly since he had seen it used with fluid, almost effortless grace. Heavy enough to hold the soul of a man, he had thought at the time. He placed the lightsaber on the table between them. Coax looked down at the device with her good eye, but did not reach out for it. The red gem set deep into her skull kept a bead on Dejaro, who waited to be dismissed or questioned.
Were there any problems?
Asked the Clatuinian.
We found it on the street,
said Dejaro, his voice sounding a little strained in the dusty, dead air.
Not too far from the body.
Did anyone see you take it?
She was still examining the deactivated blade before her.
I don't think...
And Coax looked up at him, her gemstone eye blazing for a moment.
No one saw it. It went better than we had planned. I had the wine delivered, and we were prepared to move in when he started a fight by himself. Once he went out the window, we were afraid we had lost him, that he had used some sort of Jedi trick to escape us, that he could fly away. But when we got to the bottom of the building, and there he was, dead, and the item was right beside him, just as you see it now.
Coax grunted an affirmation, then said,
We?
The other members in good standing of the Bomu clan,
said Dejaro.
Trusted family all. We would have taken the body itself, but the local law was already coming down on us. As it was, I grabbed the lightsaber and kept it until I heard from you. Kept it safe, like you ordered.
Did you turn it on?
Asked Coax almost casually.
No,
Dejaro assured her.
I don't know if it still works or not. I just followed your orders. Drug the Jedi, take his lightsaber, bring it to you. Nothing about figuring out if it worked.
Coax gave a throaty chuckle and reached out to the lightsaber, grasping its short hilt and activating the blade. It sprang like a genie from the bottle, a bolt of brilliant blue-white, accompanied by a flash of radiant thunder. The empty robes that hung around them threw back deep shadows, doubling their number. Coax moved the blade back and forth. And it looked to Dejaro as if the blade fought her, like it had its own inertia, its own spirit, resisting her control, fighting her grip. Coax seemed to feel it as well, and frowned, then thumbed off the blade. At once, the upper storage room was plunged back into a dim light, which to the Rhodian seemed even darker than before.
Good,
said Coax, and reached for her belt. Despite himself, Dejaro's hand twitched toward his own weapons belt, but the Klaatuinian instead brought out a vial tucked between her belt and her dun-colored flesh. Coax smiled, and it was not a pleasant smile. She had made Dejaro flinch, and understood in an instant how much the Rhodian trusted her, how much he feared her. Coax set the vial on the table. Even in the dim light, Dejaro could see that it was tightly packed with purplish crystals, deeper in hue than any he had seen before.
Pure,
said Coax.
None of that diluted garbage that reaches the street. Cut it, share, use it, I don't care. We're done.
Dejaro looked at the vial, then up at the Klaatuinian, then nodded, reached out, and snagged the vial. He tucked it into an inner pocket and said,
There's something else.
Coax's eyebrow, the one above the gem-set socket, jerked upward slightly.
Something else?
It took you a while to contact us,
said Dejaro.
While we were waiting, there was another.
Another?
Coax repeated, her voice careful, trying to draw the story out.
Another Jedi,
said the Rhodian.
Came to the restaurant, talked to the staff, tracked us back to the warehouse.
Coax held her hands out, palms outward.
Didn't you think to burn out the warehouse and move your supplies just to prevent that possibility?
We were in the process. That is, we intended to. But we didn't think he would get here before you,
managed Dejaro. Coax frowned and looked at the empty table once more.
Tell me what happened.
We ambushed him,
said Dejaro quietly.
Ambushed the Jedi.
Did you kill him?
Said Coax, and her intent was clear in the tone of her question. One dead Jedi on Makim Te was a casualty. 2 would attract more attention than the Spice Lord would want.
We lost a lot of people. The Jedi, he had backup, and he...
Dejaro froze when Coax transfixed him with the ruby eye.
Did you kill him?
She repeated.
No,
said Dejaro, looking away.
There was a firefight. The warehouse caught fire in the battle.
Too little, too late,
said Coax.
You should have torched the place the night the first Jedi died.
Dejaro nodded.
We didn't want to lose the stock. We had a lot of funeral supplies there.
Then Coax did something that Dejaro did not expect. She laughed. It was a full-throated, hearty, honest laugh. The laugh of someone confronted by the basic stupidity of the galaxy.
You kill a Jedi, then are surprised to find another one comes looking for him. You let this new Jedi uncover your operation, resulting in a firefight and setting the warehouse ablaze, and you're worried about the stock?
Dejaro himself managed a sickly chuckle and said,
We're tapped out now, except for...
He tapped the vial in his pocket with his palm.
I see,
said Coax, pulling her features back into a stern repose.
So you need...
More of the hard spice. More Tempest,
said Dejaro.
We can make it up to you. Just a little advance. Enough to keep the regulars stocked up. We did what you asked for. We didn't expect the Jedi to bring backup.
I don't think the Spice Lord will be happy about this development. Do you think that's the case?
Asked Coax.
If you want, I can talk to the Spice Lord.
Said Dejaro.
Explain things.
The Spice Lord has more important matters to deal with than talking to street-level dealers.
Said Coax.
That is why the Spice Lord has me.
She skewered him with her good eye, and a silence grew between the two.
So?
Dejaro's throat was dry now.
Do you think you could do something about this?
Yes, I think I could.
She said.
I think I could warn the Spice Lord that there is another Jedi, one with allies. I could also find out who these allies are and tell you. Is that what you would want?
Dejaro nodded.
The Jedi killed my clan brothers and clan sisters.
He said.
We need vengeance on their behalf.
Consider it done,
said Coax.
You have my word. The Bomu clan will get its vengeance against this Jedi. But I will warn you, if the Jedi killed so many of your clan just at the outset, there will be more lives lost before you get your vengeance.
Dejaro nodded enthusiastically.
Yes, we know. It is the price you pay for vengeance.
The Rhodian turned to leave the Klatooinian with her prize.
One last thing,
said Coax, and Dejaro froze in his tracks, turning slightly.
I will have to tell the Spice Lord that we have this problem because the Bomu clan neglected to cover its tracks sufficiently,
said Coax.
And I will have to report that I have taken appropriate action.
The Klatooinian's hand drifted to her weapons belt. Dejaro pulled his blaster, and if Coax had been going for her own, he would have beaten her to the draw. Instead, the Klatooinian pulled one of her throwing blades, and in a graceful, almost casual flick of the wrist, planted it deeply in the Rhodian's neck from 5 paces away. Dejaro went down, gurgling. Coax liked to think that last noise was an attempt at an apology. The Spice Lord's agent knelt over the dead Rhodian and pulled the small vial, the last pure sample of Tempest on Macomte, from Dejaro's inside pocket. Then she pulled one of the death robes from its hooks and draped it solemnly over the body.
Another victim of this new Jedi,
said Coax.
But I am good to my word, and will gladly throw as many of your clan in his way as I need to.
She let out a deep sigh.
But first,
continued the one-eyed Klatooinian,
I will have to send a message to the Spice Lord, presenting the bad news. And let me tell you, Rhodian, that you got off easy in that you had to deal with me instead of the one I serve.